Welcome to Church Biz. I am your host, Reverend Patrina White McClure. I am so excited about our show today. So I thank you for being a part and for viewing this, even if it's after our live stream. But before I introduce our very wonderful guest, let me remind you that WCEG Talk Radio, the comments that will be discussed, the content will be that of my own and that of Sheriff Thomas Brown. And at this point, I do want to have him introduce him. Welcome, Sheriff Brown, to the WCEG Church Biz Talk Show.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so excited being here with you this morning. So
Oh,
excited.
thank you. And I'm so excited to have you. You have such a beautiful personality, and everyone can't help but notice it when they come into your presence. So, again, thank you for being a part of our show. We're going to talk about your book and momentarily your autobiography on crossing bridges. But before we get there, I do have a couple of questions I just want to break the ice with. And one of them is, could you define for us the difference between the sheriff department and the police department?
I can do that. And I'm going to start first with one small correction. We call it, and the correct term is sheriff's office. And the reason
Sheriff's
why
office.
it is the
Okay.
sheriff's office is because when the king or queen first sent the first colonists to the United States, they knew one of the things they need to have was a tax collector and law and order. So the term sheriff comes from the colonial days of England. And the king decreed that in each state there will be a sheriff for those two purposes. So it is as old as the old English Constitution itself. And so as the United States grew and Georgia grew, and Georgia developed their Georgia Constitution, each county in Georgia, by the Constitution of the state of Georgia, had a sheriff who was considered the chief law enforcement officer of that particular county. And so thus, because it is a constitutional office, the sheriff is the sheriff's office. Unlike the police department, which is by local legislation, by the mayor and the county, or the mayor and the city governing authority, put in place a police department, like the water department, the HR department, the health department. They all answer to the mayor and the governing authority of that county, whereas the sheriff answer to the people of that county. And so I would say that, and thus the difference is, as cities begin to grow from counties, they will want to have more control over their law enforcement. So by local legislation, they would establish police departments, and sheriffs will decide on their own if they would relinquish some authority, such as the patrolling of the streets, and be primarily responsible for the jails, the courthouse security, the security of the judges, the fugitive squad. You will hear it back when you look at old cowboy pictures. They said, we're going to round up a posse to go look for a bad guy. The sheriff grant that authority to the city to do the proactive patrolling. Some sheriff's departments or sheriff's offices will not do that. As you move more into rural areas, you will notice that the sheriff's offices do everything. As you move more closer into the urban areas, you see more and more of the cities having their police departments. You're about to see a big little battle beginning to brew in Fulton County that's coming up now, where the sheriff there is having his authority tested by the governing authority of the Fulton County Commissioners. So that's something that's going to have to be worked out in the courts. But those are the fundamental differences. Police department write tickets. They investigate crimes. Sheriffs, for the most part, are responsible for the jail, responsible for the welfare of the inmates in the jail, are responsible for securing the courthouse, are responsible for protecting the judges and the participants within that courthouse, and they are responsible for taking a criminal warrant issued by a judge to go look for a person and bring that person to justice and hold that person until their day in court can come.
That is amazing, a history lesson, and then using it in light of a present day situation here in the metro Atlanta area. So that's really almost like two different governing authorities battling it out, is what you're basically saying.
That is exactly what I'm saying. And you have seen it before. Other constitutional officers, like tax commissioners, have had to battle it out, so to speak, your words, not mine, with the county commissioners in terms of the crossing over to one person's authority versus another. Very interesting dynamics in local government. Good civics lesson.
Yes, it is an excellent one. And the amazing thing is, we hear all these titles as citizens, those who are not involved in politics, but we really don't understand the full gamut of what comes under the umbrella of the title. And so, thank you for making that plain with us, for us. So, I am aware that there are not as many people who are pursuing careers in either of these venues or outlets, shall I say. But do you know of any type of contributing thoughts or feelings that people have who decide to seek employment elsewhere? And I kind of want to tag the military in on it as well, since they are complaining of low enrollment into the armed forces.
That's an excellent question, and I think there are many factors that play into that. I was reading an interesting article the other day about the United States Secret Service, the primary agency for protecting the presidents and other high-ranking federal officials. Their numbers are very low. People are not coming in wanting to be with the Secret Service, other federal law enforcement agencies. Police departments and sheriffs are running through that same issue in getting good quality candidates wanting to come for a career in law enforcement. Part of that is the pay is not sufficient enough. You get a good college educated woman, a man, they can a lot of times find jobs in other careers outside of law enforcement and not have to subject yourself to the hazards of dealing with other human beings who don't necessarily want to take orders or conform in a way that they should. Just like television cameras brought light on to the civil rights movements of the 50s and the 60s and allowed a lot of changes to take place, television cameras and telephones with video camcorders have brought to light recent problems with brutality by the police department on our citizens. And that has created a stigma where a lot of people did not want to come to law enforcement because of that black eye. They're starting to change some, but not at the progress that many police departments would like to see. All of them are trying to hire law enforcement officers, firefighters, paramedics, and low pay has a lot to do with it. If you want good quality police officers and firefighters, you may have to want to pay more taxes. Citizens don't want to do that. But if you want protection, if you want good protection, if you want good qualified law enforcement officers, then you're going to have to pay them more than a manager at a quick trip store that makes more than the starting pay of a police officer.
That is an excellent point. Wow. So sometimes money answereth all things, like Jesus said. But anywho, that's one thing. Then you look at the benefits and all of those things that come along with being officers in those types of positions, or like you said, Secret Service. I'm assuming CIA. All of that is all encapsulated with that particular thought or movement. Um, Now, the extra pay also helps with these officers not having to do the extra work outside of regular duty time. I spoke with the officer of an agency recently. They said at least 80% of our officers work part-time hours. And I'm like, whoa, that's pretty high. So we need to show proper respect. But again, like you said, we have to pay the taxes because government can't do it. You can have the best dream ever in life, but if there's no money to fund it, the dream is literally nothing. All right. So tracking your history, because I wanted to say something about the politics coming up, but that might be an off-air conversation that we need to have. Looking at your resume, you said you were fire chief of DeKalb County in Georgia from 1985 to 1990. Now, how did that happen for you?
Well, like so many young people, I came out of high school not really knowing what I wanted to do in life. And so I kind of fumbled around from one medial job to another job that deep down inside, it was giving me a paycheck, but internally, it was not something that I knew I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And so one early morning in the city of Atlanta, at around 5 a.m. while I was on my job at the old CNS National Bank, delivering mail from one bank to another, I passed this fire station that was on North Avenue between the peach trees, and walked into that station at 5 in the morning and had a conversation with another African-American male who had been a firefighter for a couple of years that was sitting in there on watch, as they call it, and got to talking to him about the fire department. And I was so intrigued. I had an uncle who was a second layer of young men who integrated the Winston-Salem, North Carolina Fire Department. And I remember going there as a child, and he would take us to the firehouse and turn the lights on for us and all of those sort of things. And it really, really intrigued me. And I was 19 at the time, but I had to be 20 to get on the fire department. And so I went through this process of applying, was successful in becoming an Atlanta Fire Department firefighter, worked in the city of Atlanta for 13 years, and was timed it just right for me that I achieved the rank of deputy fire chief, which is third in the hierarchy. And the position came open in DeKalb County for fire chief at the same time that a position came open in the city of Atlanta as fire chief. And I interviewed for both of them, and took the one in DeKalb County for a host of reasons that I discuss in my book when we talk about my book. And came to DeKalb County as their first African-American fire chief at age 32. So it was something that when I started in the fire department, I thoroughly enjoyed it from the very, very beginning. I had established as a goal in my life that I wanted to be a fire chief by age 40 and stay there long enough and retire after having a very nice, illustrious career and everything. And as God would open doors up for me, I was the fire chief at age 32. So I had to reset my whole new goal mechanism because I always plan things, Reverend McClure. I always plan things in my life 10 years apart, and I always ask myself, where do I want to be 10 years from now? And everything that I did, I methodically worked toward that 10-year goal. And so yeah, so there I was, 32 years old, and I was a fire chief, and it was quite an experience, quite an experience.
That is beautiful. So you had a vision, you casted it, and you pursued it. And I'm saying that out loud in case people don't hear the running theme. And once you achieved it, number one, you were open to God's leading. So you got there, you're like, okay, God, what do I do now? So you'd hit a reset. And so what they say, you reinvented yourself. That's how the world puts it.
Mm-hmm.
And you allow God to show you more. So after you leave DeKalb County, then what do you do?
Well, I never left DeKalb. My boss was the public safety director of DeKalb County, and he, let's say, was asked to retire 5 years after I was the fire chief. And when he left office and the position of public safety director came open, which was normally for police chiefs, and when you look at the history of public safety directors, they all came from the police ranks. I applied for the job anyway. I thought the job was more administrative. You had a police chief. My job was to make sure policies was enforced, that a proper budget was prepared, that someone made sure that we were watching things from an ethical standpoint, from a standards standpoint, from a professional standpoint, and that people were doing things the right way. So that was my job. That's how I saw it. And my boss, Manuel Maloof, who was then the chairman of the Board of Commissioners for DeKalb County, he saw something in me relative to that. There were some other political things that was in play for the police chief to get the job, but there were a number of people in the political arenas who did not want him to get the job. And so what happened was I had the police leadership to fall behind my appointment and help convince Mr. Maloof that I would make a better public safety director as opposed to bringing someone else in from the outside, because, to use their words, we know Tom Brown, we can get along with Tom Brown. Now, there's some real unique history behind that that will be an interesting read, and we can talk about it and elaborate on it some more if you want to. But the bottom line was they thought they were going to control me. And I got the job. I became the public safety director and immediately started looking at how they do things in the police field and asked the question, why do you do it that way? That don't make any sense to me. That seems more reactive and not proactive. It seems more like you guys are warriors to the community and not guardians to the community. So this whole things need to be rethink. And so so I came in there and made an immediate impact in terms of the relation between the police and the community that resulted in an immediate reduction in crime. So that was a good job I had for some 10 years as public safety director. It was a good job, but I would say the 1990s, the time was without a doubt the most stressful time in my life. You know, I had a young family. You know, my daughter was only 5 years old at the time. A year later, I would have my son. They're all young. They're going through school. And so the everyday burdens of raising a young family and dealing with a community, a rapidly growing African-American community in DeKalb County at the time, the crack cocaine epidemic and everything that came along with that, mm-hmm. the slow acceptance of change by many of the rank and file in the police department and having to deal with that, and just everyday politics that some of the elected officials in DeKalb County saw in a growing in political strength public safety director who they saw must have his eyes on a bigger prize in DeKalb County because the whole dynamics was changing. And all of that credit, quite frankly, a test for me in terms of patience and maintaining my strength, not only from a body standpoint, but from a religious standpoint and mental standpoint.
So I'm sure you had to constantly consult the Bible for direction, as well as spiritual leaders that you trusted in the community, because so many of them can also have their own hidden agendas.
Oh, yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I would tell you one thing that I should have said much earlier that I didn't. When I finished high school and started all of those menial jobs, it was because when I came out of high school, I really did not prepare myself for the next step academically. And as I like to say to young kids when I used to talk to them a lot, I see my way out of school, which meant I made C's all the way through. And so college did not work out for me immediately after high school. And so my mother gave me two options. She said that I can quit and get a job, or I can quit and get a job. And so I found these little media jobs that I had until I got old enough to get on the fire department. So I went back to school part-time to get those college degrees. And eventually I got it, because otherwise I wouldn't have made it as public safety director if everyone could point a finger at me and say, this guy doesn't even have a college degree. So by the time I became the public safety director, I had checked that box. So I was good there. So now as public safety director, and I'm going through all of this stuff, all of this mess. You know, Black folks was killing Black folks. Crack cocaine was at an all-time high. You know, they're locking up the crack cocaine dealers, which was young teenagers on the street corners, and they were collateral damage for the large drug dealers. So, I mean, it was just a revolving door. We needed to do something different. And so, but I had to have alliances. And I tell you, if it wasn't for people like Reverend George Moore at St. Philip's AEM Church, may he rest in peace.
Right.
I had two pastors. I had Reverend Dr. Cynthia Hale.
All right.
A very interesting story there. Had it not been for Reverend Hale, I would have been voting for John Edwards for president instead of Barack Obama. She had to have a come to Jesus meeting with me about that. And she also baptized my two kids as well. And Bishop Eddie Long in New Birth Baptist Church. It was the community support that I had of those three pastors, and with that came that congregation. So you count the numbers at St. Philip AME,
yes,
Real Hope Christian Church, and New Birth Missionary Baptist Church, and there were a number of other churches and pastors who I had relationship with. But those three right there, if they spoke singularly or together, a lot was being said, and politicians listened, particularly white politicians, because they knew in DeKalb, you weren't going to win anything if you didn't have the Black vote. And you don't get the Black vote unless you go through the Black churches. And so I recognized that very early on, and that was my strength. That kept me afloat.
It's interesting you say that about the power of the Black vote, because it still rings true today.
Absolutely.
And that's why so much effort is being poured out, not only in the Black communities, but the Hispanic and Latino communities as well, So I hope our WCEG listeners who still haven't voted yet, go ahead and exercise your voice through your vote, because they might not respect the color of your skin, but they will respect the power of your vote.
And
And
they don't
so
have a one more time, and that's this Tuesday.
that's exactly it. So come on, hurry, 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 everybody, make plans to make it to your local voting polls if you want things to be in favor for all. And I'm sure you have some reservations about the outcome of this presidential election. Wouldn't you happen to have those? I'm assuming. Let me say that. I shouldn't assume and do like they say.
Well, I mean, I think the appropriate thing for me to say is whoever's your preference, vote. You need to vote. As I heard Maynard Jackson say one time, if you're complaining about the traffic, if you don't vote, you don't count. If you're concerned about the police department, if you don't vote, you don't count. If you think your trash is not being picked up on a regular basis, you don't vote, you don't count. Politics is local. If you deal with politics local, then state politics will fall in line, and you have to vote there. The power going down that ballot. But this is an important elections coming up. My position now is such that I cannot take a public position that would be inappropriate for me. So I would simply say, if you don't vote, you don't count. Don't say nothing to me if you don't like how things are going on.
In fact, I just took up that own personal resolution. I told someone the other day, moving forward, if people want to talk about politics, I'm going to tell them, if you didn't vote, I can't have this conversation with you. I can only have a conversation with like-minded people. And like they're saying now, understand the assignment. Okay, we only have one. Let's make it count. So, but I love how you relied on your community partners, because it's necessary. A lot of people want to say, hey, I made it all by myself. Nobody helped me. No, we can't do anything in life by ourselves.
Never can, never can.
All
You're
right, exactly. And so with all of the spiritual guidance and the community partners, you then found yourself voted into office 4 times as the sheriff of DeKalb County. That is amazing.
I'm gonna tell you, that's an interesting story, and I'm on part of my 10-year plan. Part of my 10-year plan. When I got to DeKalb County, and I saw the political dynamics, the Black population in DeKalb County when I arrived there in July of 1985 was 16% African American. And it was growing rapidly. It was growing rapidly. I saw the other people saw that as well. So it was easy for me to say, I'm going to get here. I'm going to get to a certain point. I knew Manuel Maloof, the guy that hired me, had 7 more years in office. Then there would be another CEO who more than likely, because of the numbers, was going to be Caucasian. That person turned out to be Leanne Levitan. I had great relationships with both of them. After that time, I was going to run for CEO of DeKalb County. That was my plan. I was going to retire as public safety director and run for CEO of DeKalb County. But my daughter was in middle school. My son was in elementary school. And my wife at the time could not grasp my reasoning for running when I had a stable job. And more importantly, what would I do if I didn't win? Well, you don't run for political office thinking in the back of your mind, what if I don't win? Otherwise, you might as well not run for political office. So I couldn't get her blessings. So I didn't run. And that was a mistake. And what happened was another African American ran, and he won. And I would have beat him. I would have beat him. And my wife knew that at the time. But more importantly than that, he changed up on me personally immediately because he saw me as a political threat and he wanted me gone. So he kind of made it known that the job would be abolished, I will be out of here, and he can be, in his mind, the most dominant force in DeKalb County. Well, as things would happen, one of my captains in my police department wanted to run for sheriff of DeKalb County. And he ran against the sitting sheriff, a guy by the name of Sidney Dorsey, who came from the Atlanta Police Department. Dorsey was a first-term sheriff. Derwin Brown was one of my captains. He ran for sheriff. It was without a doubt the most ugliest, nastiest election in DeKalb County history. At the end of the day, Derwin Brown beat Sidney Dorsey for the election. We now know 16 days before Derwin Brown was to take office, Sidney Dorsey had put out a hit on Derwin Brown and had him gunned down in his front yard on December the 16th, 2000. When I came home from the hospital, some 2:30 in the morning, I'm laying in the bed next to my wife, and I can remember watching the ceiling fan turn in the dark room. And I say to my wife, I'm going to run for sheriff. And this time I had her blessings because she knew it was nothing else waiting for me after that. So as history would be, I was appointed the interim sheriff, and I ran for the election against 6 other people, won without a runoff, and ran every time since then for 4 consecutive terms. And that's the backline in terms of how I got there. So instead of me doing the 8 years as CEO, which is part of that original plan, I end up doing 14 years as the sheriff of DeKalb County.
Amazing. It is amazing. And one thing you pointed out, and this is applicable to all, we know where we made a decision that altered our trajectory. And so I'm saying that to let everybody know, even though you've had a successful career, a blessed life, highly favored, God is still engaged in every facet of our lives. Your life too. Don't give up, everybody. Don't give up. You just got to keep pushing, keep moving forward. Let the past be the past. Learn from it. Move forward. It's time to move forward. Stop getting stuck in yesteryear. And I thank you for sharing that story, because a lot of us in Metro Atlanta are acquainted with that story about Derwin Brown and Sidney Dorsey. That just was totally terrible, trying to bring the street into mainstream politics. It just doesn't work out. But praise be to God, you moved past there, served your time as sheriff, and then you go on to become the owner of Brit and Just Properties.
Yep, I played around a little bit with real estate. I purchased real property, stuff I learned from my mother. My mother would buy houses. She'd keep them, she'd rent them out, and she had an entrepreneur spirit, even though her biggest claim to fame was a graduate of Booker T. Washington High School. She never went to college, but she knew how to stretch a dime, how to make things happen. And among a number of things she did, one of them was purchasing rental property and stuff. So that's something I learned from her. So I just had 2 or 3 rental properties coming up, and for tax purposes, you incorporate it. I mean, that's what we have to learn. You can buy some rental property and pull in the money, but you can also reduce your tax liability if you incorporate yourself And so I learned that aspect of it from one of my many mentors that I met through my mother, Mr. Robert Fuller, of the old Fuller Realty Company back in the day in Atlanta. May he rest in peace. One of the first Black real estate agents in Atlanta, taught me those kinds of things that I learned from him. And so Britton Judge Properties became something that I had before then. And this is probably not in the resume, but in keeping with my little 10-year goal, the plan was to run for Congress. And,
wow.
and I retired from the sheriff's office to do just that. And offered myself for election. I ran for Congress. The lesson learned there was we had a Democratic incumbent. I ran against him. He was a friend. He only beat me by 7 percentage points. But had I ran as an independent, I probably would have beat him because my many years in law enforcement, I had big ties in the community. So he and I were splitting the Democratic votes. But I had strong support in the Republican community. But they couldn't vote for me because they wanted to vote for this Perdue guy who ran for Senate when he first ran, and you can't split the ballot. So amazingly, I raised most of my money from the Republicans, but all of my votes came from the Democrats, but not enough. Had I ran as an independent, instead of me running in May, where I lost the primary, I would have been in the general in November, and had the benefit of what share of the Democratic votes I got and all of the Republican votes. I would have ran the election just like I ran when I ran for sheriff. The thought process was I had 6 people running against me. All of us were African Americans. So my strategy was very simple: get my share of the Black vote and all of the white vote. And I won the election.
So. Awesome. Now, is that a part of your autobiography as well?
It is. It is.
Okay,
I talk about that in the book. There's a lot of things in there about that. When we move toward that, I give you some more backstories in terms of my life, my times, my stories, why I did things, how I moved in certain directions, and how forging relationships with any and everybody that you can always be a benefit from you. One should never, it is a textbook on never look down on anyone, because you never know who will be there for you later on that will come and help you do something. One of the biggest compliments someone paid to me was about 2 years ago. I'm going in and out of this soul food restaurant on Mountain Industrial Boulevard. Well, there was a homeless person that lived near that place. And without him even asking me, I would give him $5 or $10, which is much more money than I normally give. Because I see a lot of homeless people on the street, and if you don't watch it, you'll grow cold to that. And you just got to turn, because they're just all over the place. That's something that we as a nation have to work with and work for. But I would do that to him. And he reminded me and said, I don't expect you to remember me, but I used to be in your jail. And you would always treat us with respect, required your staff to treat us with respect. And one thing that I liked about you, Sheriff, you never. That really meant a lot to me. And so you never forget those things, because you never know. When somebody's going to be there for you and do something for you that you need, no matter how small or how large. And I try to live by that. Now, I'm not a perfect individual. I know I'm slipped sometimes, but I try to live by that.
Oh, we all are not perfect. Yes, but that's the similar philosophy I I try to live by as well, to help whoever I can, because that little source of help might be the next rung on the ladder that the person can climb out of their situation, out of their hole,
Mhm.
to their next level. And we overlook the little things that we do, but that's such an awesome story, and I thank you for that, because that's very touching and it's meaningful to me. Because just recently I saw a young man, homeless, it was obvious, eating out of some trash.
Mm.
And I had to stop to try to help, as best as I could. But we can't do everything. But everybody, let's help everybody that's trying to help somebody else.
Mhm.
You may have a few $20. Skip Burger King. Forget about McDonald's. Let that go and feed some homeless people, everybody.
Right,
But
right.
I love your story about the investment, especially in a volatile time as it is now, in regards to finding affordable housing. So many people don't even understand that all it takes is a few people coming together to form a corporation, buy some rental properties, everybody put in a few $1,000s, fix it up or whatever, and rent it out, and they charge whatever they want. So are you in favor of government coming into these private sector industries and putting a cap on rental or lease property amounts?
Well, I'll be honest with you, I've never really thought about it that way. Um, Mom always taught me that when you get a rental house, keep it, if you get a good tenant, keep the rent as low as you can
Mm,
affordably keep that rent, because it's much better to have a long-term tenant than find yourself constantly, going in to repair what they messed up, or screening to try to find another tenant. If it don't work out, trying to get them out is just a pain. So, I never looked at it from that big picture standpoint. Uh, I guess because I know we are a capitalistic society, and we give based on what the market would bear. Now, I do it the easy way. I don't like just renting straight out to an individual. I like just doing it with Section 8. Section 8, they find, they screen, they find, the person. I can bring in anyone I want to that has a Section 8 voucher that meet my criteria. They have their rent range that they look at and see what that area demands in terms of rent, and I don't have to worry about that. So, but for me to just say I'm gonna put a big global picture and say it ought to be a cap on all rent, no, I'm not going to say that, because I understand it from a landlord standpoint, and I've had to deal with tenants that I don't care what you do, they're just simply not going to take care of your property, and and while I just try to work my way through that, I just never thought about the government just coming in and imposing rent caps. I mean, you listen to the election going on now, they're talking about how food prices is high, gasoline is high. There's no president in the world that has told publics how much it costs a loaf of bread should cost, or a
okay.
Shell gas station how much you can charge on gas, unless he or she is going to declare a national emergency and put a price freeze. Well, nobody's going to suggest that. Not one Republican is going to suggest that, or not one Democrat is going to suggest that, and not one independent is going to suggest that. Otherwise, we're moving away from what this country was founded on, and that was a capitalistic society.
My thoughts exactly. So this is more our air off air conversation, I'm thinking. But anywho, let
We
us
got a
move
lot of
forward.
off-air stuff to talk about, don't we?
So now your consultant services in government relations and police reform, you only did that for a period of time. Is that what, 9 years?
Yeah, I retired. There's not so much golf you can do, and it's not so much traveling you can do. And I did and still do a lot of that. But I built a lot of relationship over the years, and I learned from other retired police chiefs and such that people will actually hire you for your Rolodex. And Rolodex don't come cheap. They want, I'm playing golf one day and my telephone rings and it's the president of a healthcare company that does healthcare in jails and prisons. Another shameless plug. You'll get all of that in my book, Crossing Bridges by Thomas Jr. But I'm out there playing golf and my phone rang and it's the president of this company. And he's asking me, well, what are you doing now? I said, well, I'm playing golf. He said, no, what are you doing now? I said, well, I'm retired. I'm doing some traveling. I'm in a good way. Life is fine for me. And he said, well, we'd like for you to come work with us. And I said, I'm not looking to be no salesman. I mean, that's not my thing. No, we don't want you to do that. We want you to introduce us to other sheriffs, go and play in the sheriff's golf tournaments and include us so we can network with the sheriff, arrange lunches and dinners that we can sit down with the sheriff and talk about, what we do. We just need you to do that and come with us to the conferences, the national conferences, stand in our vendor booths and get, your old friends to gravitate towards you and introduce us. And I said, fine. I said, now how often do I have to work? And they said, oh, we only need you for about 40 hours a year. I said, you mean 40 hours a month? He said, no, we only need you for 40 hours a year. That's all we want you to do. And get this now, Rev McClure, we'll pay you each. You're gonna work or not. And I'm a little concerned because your computer screen froze. Did you just hear what I said?
No, I didn't. I was going to ask you to say that part again.
Yeah, so the guy says to me, we just need you 40 hours a year. And we will pay you, though, a stipend each month, whether we need you or not. And George Turner, who's the former police chief in Atlanta, he had a little consulting firm once, and he said, Thomas, they're only hiring you for your Rolodex. And that was the deal. And so for 9 years, I had a profitable consulting company where all I did was ate in the best restaurants, played in the best golf course, and introduced sheriffs to my client, who I had to be prepared to say they do good service, and they were my medical vendor the whole time that I was sheriff. So, if I say they did good work, you got to do good work. And the Lord blessed me to hit that particular sweet spot in my life that I was able to still do what I wanted to do and still supplemented my salary just because I had somebody on speed dial.
That's beautiful.
And there's no shame in my game on that. Do you hear me?
Oh, let it be my game. It wouldn't be shame there either. I'm just saying, everybody. But God is so good. We only have about 10 minutes left. It's going really, really fast. Are there other key things that come out of your book, Crossing Bridges, that you think speaks loudly to all of American society today?
Well, I was challenged many times from a number of people because I'm an avid Facebook user, and every once in a while something may happen in the world or something I'm reminded of, and I would write a very long post about it, and people would come back and say, you should write a book. You should write a book. And I've been thinking about that, and when I turned 70, I said, it's time to do that. It's time to do that. And so I wanted to write this book for at least 3 reasons. Number one, I wanted to write it for my children and my children's children. I wanted them to have a family history or where they came from that came from a live, living person that they knew that would make the story that much more interesting than try to read something that some great, great, great grandfather or grandmother may or may not have written. We were fortunate in my family line that it goes real deep on my paternal side. I trace my lineage all the way back to the early 1700s when we first came to America as indentured servants. But we couldn't go far back on my maternal side, no further than my great grandmother, because my grandmother would not talk past her mother. They were not brought to America as indentured servants. They was brought here as slaves. And something went on in my grandmother's life that happened to her personally and that she witnessed to her mother that was a secret she took to her grave. So it stopped at Meddy Branham, that history. And so I wanted to talk about my family lineage. I wanted to talk about my immediate family, and I wanted to talk about my professional life. Within my professional life for them to read, it also gives, and this is very important to me, a Black history realization and lesson of DeKalb County politics from 1985 up until the time I retired as DeKalb County, of how Blacks navigated the political arena in DeKalb County within the constituency, within the government itself, and with the relationship they had with each other in terms of how Black dealt with other Black elected officials. Very interesting story, not the prettiest of all times, but politics is a hardball sport. So I was totally unfiltered in my book, about crossing bridges.
Hold it all the way up so we can see it.
And if you would allow me, I'm just going to read a brief portion about my book, and for people will know what I'm saying about. Again, it's Crossing Bridges by Thomas Brown, The Bridge to the Truth. Having grown up in the Mosley Park subdivision of Southwest Atlanta, nobody could have ever convinced me that this Henry McNeil Turner High School graduate would dedicate his life to 40 years of public service. I was a C student trying to figure out life, and at the time was not prepared for life. But through others believing in me, especially my mother, Rosa Bell Branham Brown, and countless others, my life found purpose. I found my passion as an Atlanta firefighter at age 20 and was appointed as the first African-American fire chief of DeKalb County, Georgia at age 33. I became the first African-American to be appointed as the public safety director of DeKalb County, Georgia. And finally, I was appointed to the interim sheriff of DeKalb County after the assassination of the sheriff-elect of the county, before winning 4 consecutive elections as the high sheriff of DeKalb County. Crossing Bridges is not just about my family or the phenomenal lineage of the first generation of Browns who arrived in America as indentured servants in the 1700s. But it's about facing the challenges of life and conviction, determination, and the character to do the right thing against many challenges. In public service, I was immediately introduced to the politics and personal agendas that went along with it. It required great strategic moves and savvy alliances and networking to overcome a lot of bridges. On my part, including dealing with the behind-the-scenes nonsense, information, and vilification of Dr. Crawford Lewis, one of the DeKalb County premier educators, fighting to get decent health care for DeKalb County inmates, facing former Sheriff Sidney Dorsey, a convicted criminal and inmate, and so many more stories that reveal new perspectives through the eyes of one who saw it, lived it, influenced much of it, and can now write about it. This is my life. This is my story. These are my times. And, It is available at Amazon Books, Eagle Eye Bookstore, which is located on North Decatur Road near Claremont. And also you can email me, get me through my Facebook page, and I can get it to you personally and autograph it. But it's an interesting read, and it was something that people told me I needed to do, and I decided to do it. And one thing, Reverend McClure, I would tell you about this is, if I can write a book, anybody can write a book, and everybody has a story, and people is interested in everybody's story.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much for that. And how do we follow you on social media?
You can get me at Thomas E. Brown Indicator on Facebook. You can also get me on Instagram. I'm Wolverine 1906. You know, I went to Turner High School, and one misconception, it wasn't Turner High Wolves, it was Turner High Wolverines. So you can get Instagram at Wolverines 1906, and you can also get me on LinkedIn.
Beautiful, beautiful. And what are your future goals besides hitting the author circuit? I think you're going to have a lot to do on that. So what's in your next 10 years?
Well, you know, I can say without going into a great deal of details. I was blessed when President Biden won to be appointed the U.S. Marshal for the Northern District of Georgia. So I'm back in law enforcement now. It's a presidential appointed position. That's all I can say about that.
Praise the Lord.
I can't do a whole lot of talking because we're supposed to be apolitical. And so I have to be careful, because anything that I say can be construed that I'm speaking for the President of the United States. So disclaimer, everything you have heard from me is not from the President of the United States. It has come from me and only me. So that's where I'm at now. I would do that for as long as the president, whoever is the president, allows me to do it, or I'm ready to step down and take a more active role in raising the 4 grandkids that I have, and the 5th one that is on the way. And I am so looking forward and so much enjoy doing just that.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, Sheriff Brown, thank you for being a part of our show on today. I'm so excited. This has been a wonderful time. It went by so fast.
They always do, don't they?
Yes. And so I want to thank our WCEG Network listeners for listening, and to Church Biz on today with our interview with Thomas. I have to say your middle name, Thomas Edison Brown. And I hope that you have been blessed. He's lived his life by biblical principles. Listen to all the ins and outs, the turns. He trusted God through it all, and you can do the same in your life. Again, this is Reverend Patrina White McClure, and like I always tell you, take care.